In this video, we're going to discuss how to write a legal memo in law school.
Hello, my name is Chris and I'm a law school tutor with jdlogic.org.
Before we get started, just want to let you know that you can download all the documents you see in this video, including the complete sample memo from my website.
In this video, I want to take you through the entire process of writing a legal memo. There are several kinds of memos you'll probably be writing in law school, but the one we're going to work on today is called a predictive memo. If we think about the different stages of a legal case, what we've done so far in our memo is we've only met the client and we're trying to decide whether or not this client has a good case that we can take to court. So in this predictive memo, we're just trying to make a prediction to our own boss whether or not the client has a good case. We'll get more into the facts in a second, but basically what happens in our case is a woman comes into our office and says her son has been bitten by a dog. She wants to know if she can sue the owner of the dog for the damage caused to her son. If her son provoked the dog, she's not going to be able to recover. So we need to predict whether or not we think a court would find that the son provoked the dog or not. Now that we know what kind of memo we're writing, we have to move on to step one of every memo, which is to read the case file and understand the prompt. I'm going to show you our case file in a second here, and you'll see that it's only a couple pages. But just to let you know, you might get a case file that's 30 or 40 pages long. But whether your facts are short or long, the technique is going to be the same. You need to read all those facts and organize them in some way, and then understand what the assignment is asking you to do. All right, let's take a look at our case file here and go through the facts, pick out the important facts, characters, places, things like that, so we know what we're talking about when we start organizing our legal argument. Okay, so what we have, and you'll get something like this from your professor too, we just have an interoffice memo from our boss, Helen Haas, and the subject here is Jennifer and Kenny Power. That's the mother and the son that I said earlier, and we're talking about a potential dog bite claim. So let's go through this, highlight important facts that will be important to our issue later on. Okay, the firm has recently received a call from Jennifer Power. Let's just make sure we got all of our people here. Involving a dog bite incident. Mrs. Power's 10-year-old son, Kenny Power, was bitten by a dog while playing at a park in Lineville, Illinois on July 5th, 2023. I interviewed Mrs. Power and Kenny, who provided their accounts of the events surrounding the dog bite. The underlying facts I have collected from my interview are as follows. Growing concerned that Kenny was playing too many video games over the summer, Mrs. Power encouraged Kenny to get out of the house, get some exercise, and socialize with his friends by heading to the park. Kenny texted his friend Wade LeBlanc, that's another character, to meet at the Lineville Community Recreation Area. Kenny lives 3 blocks east of the park, Wade lives 4 blocks south of the park. The boys met to play catch as they both had aspirations of trying out for the local Premier Little League team. During the game of catch, Wade threw the ball over Kenny's head and he was unable to make a catch. The ball rolled a few feet away from a dog who was tied to a park bench. We have since learned the dog's name is Dingo. So like I said, what's going to happen is the dog is going to bite Kenny, and we're really going to explore the idea of whether or not Kenny and Wade have provoked this dog. So we need to know Dingo the dog as well. Kenny told me that the dog appeared to have belonged to someone as it was clean, well groomed, had a dog tag on its collar, and had a food and water bowl within reach. Kenny moved towards Dingo to retrieve the ball, and Dingo began to bark. Okay, so now we're getting into what happened between the victim, Kenny, and the dog, Dingo here. These are going to be important facts. Wade joined Kenny near Dingo, but the boys were beyond the reach of Dingo's leash. Kenny grabbed the ball, which was also beyond Dingo's reach, and ran back to Wade while Dingo continued to bark at the boys. Wade said, "That dog's a jerk." And the boys began barking and shouting back at Dingo. Okay, so we need to keep track of what the boys did to Dingo here. So they began barking and shouting at him. Is that going to be provocation for the purposes of our case? We don't know yet. The boys threw a few sticks at Dingo but did not hit him. Is that provocation? We don't know. They also lunged towards Dingo close to the perimeter of Dingo's reach, but made sure to stay beyond Dingo's reach. All the while, Dingo continued to bark and pull against the leash to its fullest extent. Okay, the boys got tired of Dingo and went back to playing catch. Dingo stopped barking and went to lie under a tree. Soon, Wade overthrew Kenny again. This time the ball landed in Dingo's food bowl and scattered some kibble. Kenny and Wade ran back over to Dingo's area, and Kenny ran to get the ball from the bowl. Kenny and Dingo arrived at the bowl at the same time. As Kenny reached into the food bowl, Dingo bit his right hand and forearm several times, creating 2 gashes which bled profusely. Okay, so we need to know that the ball landed in the bowl. Kenny goes inside the dog's perimeter now, and he reached inside the bowl before he was bit. Maybe that's important for provocation. Kenny screamed and ran to safety as he held his bleeding arm with his other hand. A nearby jogger witnessed the incident and called 911 and Mrs. Power. Dingo's owner, who was attending a wedding in the park, arrived on the scene after the attack. The owner said Dingo has never attacked anyone before or even displayed such behavior towards strangers. Kenny required 25 stitches in his forearm as a result of the bite. His arm became infected and was forced to undergo more extensive medical treatment to help him fight the infection. Kenny still experiences pain and swelling in his arm and has acquired a rather grotesque scar. The Powers intend to have Kenny undergo cosmetic surgery on his arm, but they need to wait until Kenny's health improves. Okay, so I think that's about it for the facts. Now we need to understand what the assignment is asking us to do, what we're supposed to write about. Mrs. Power wants to know if she can pursue a cause of action against Dingo's owner. Okay, so can she sue the owner of Dingo? Before we decide whether or not to file a complaint, I would like you to research the law pertaining to the issue and draft a memo analyzing Mrs. Power's likelihood of success should we file a suit. Remember, we're writing a predictive memo. What are we going to predict here? You should only rely on the facts provided in your analysis. We had a similar case some years back, and I believe there's an Illinois statute under which an injured party can bring a claim. Please find that statute and analyze the Powers claim under it. Specifically, your memorandum should only address whether Dingo attacked Kenny without provocation. So we need to find a statute, an Illinois state statute about animals attacking people, and we need to specifically know what is provocation. Other associates have been assigned to research other aspects of the case, so please just stick to potential liability under the Illinois statute. Just stick to the statute. And do not consider potential common law claims. Further, do not consider compensatory or punitive damages or any other local ordinances. This is your professor just telling you, trying to give you a direction and what not to research. And then this is important. Your memorandum should be 1,800 words or less and follow your formatting rules and the all-important due date for this first draft. Signed, your boss. Okay, so that's what a case file might look like. Again, it might be a lot longer than that. It might have a lot more facts, and maybe you'll have multiple legal issues. But for now, we just have some facts pertaining to what happened between the boys and the dog, and we've been given an assignment to go find a statute and write a predictive memo about whether or not we think Mrs. Power would prevail if she filed a lawsuit in this case. So now that we've read our facts and our prompt, we need to organize these facts in some way to make sense of them before we move on to step 2, which is the research. Okay, our facts here were pretty simple, but I just want to show you how you can turn your facts into some sort of document that you created to make sense of everything. So up here I have the all-important due date is the first thing I would put on here. I've laid out the issues I'm trying to figure out in my research. We really want to know, does Miss Powers have a case against Dingo's owner for biting Kenny? And specifically, we want to find out, what does it mean to provoke? Did Kenny provoke the dog before he got bit? So here I just outline the events in order as far as what happened. As we'll see, what happened between the boys and the dog is how we determine whether or not the dog was provoked. So we have all of those laid out for us. And then I laid out for myself, what do I need to do? First thing I need to find is that Illinois statute about dog bites. When is an owner liable when a dog bites somebody? And we need to research cases that are going to interpret that statute. And then our next steps are going to be to write this memo. We're going to need to outline everything, and we're going to have to submit a rough draft before our due date of October 1st. And finally, I just have here some things to avoid that the prompt told us, certain aspects of the law we don't need to worry about. All right, that's about it for step 1. We've read our case file to understand the facts. We've looked at the prompt so we understand where we're going, and we've made a little document to organize everything. So students often ask me how long they should spend on certain things, and this is always going to depend on what kind of case you have. Here, this one's so easy, I think you could do all of this in under an hour, But if you have one of those long case files, it might take you a couple hours to read it a few times, organize all the facts, and really understand what you're supposed to do. But in general, I would put step 1 at 1 to 2 hours to read everything. Step 2 is going to be the research phase. We understand the facts of our case. Now we have to go find some law to apply to our facts. The two main research tools you're going to use in law school are Lexis and Westlaw. You'll almost certainly have a separate class on research where you learn how to use these tools. So I'm not going to go real deep into how they work and how to use them, but I do want to give you a quick demonstration just to show you how to get started. So research really depends on how complex your legal issue is, but I'm going to show you a quick demonstration of how I would start looking at this case if I was going to use Lexis to do my research.
All right, so I just want to give you a quick demonstration on how to start your research on this specific topic here. So this is the home page of Lexis, and you can see that there's a search bar here with our options for what kind of content we want and what kind of jurisdiction we want. So we are going to narrow our jurisdiction to just the state of Illinois because that's where our case is taking place. And we want to search a dog bite case, and we specifically want to know about the concept of provocation. We're going to leave all contents on. So let's take a look. So the first thing that's probably going to come up are cases. And we're going to get to cases in a second, but our boss asked us first to find an Illinois statute that talks about when an owner is liable for a dog bite. So let's click on statutes over here on the left. And you see our first one is a ordinance from the town or the city of Cicero. We were told to stay away from local ordinances. We want to find Illinois state statutes. So we're going to skip that one. And let's go down to the second one. Here we have the Illinois compiled statutes annotated. So this is the list of all the statutes in Illinois, the state statutes. So that's kind of what we're looking for. We want to find an Illinois statute. So let's click on that one. And it turns out this is exactly what we're looking for. This is the statute that tells us that a owner of a dog can be held liable to whomever that dog attacks as long as the dog wasn't provoked. So here we have it. If a dog or other animal without provocation attacks, attempts to attack, or injures any person who is peaceably conducting himself or herself in any place where he or she may lawfully be, the owner of such dog or other animal is liable in civil damages to such person for the full amount of the injury proximately caused thereby. So what you need to do at this point, you found the statute. I would highlight and copy that entire text into my research document along with a citation for this piece of the Illinois statute. So now that you found the statute, you have a couple options. You could click up here where it says citing decisions. This will take you to cases that have cited to this Illinois statute. That's one way to go on Lexis. That's not my favorite way to go. What I would do is go back to our original search. And now instead of categorizing by statutes and legislation, we want to go back to cases. We want to find some cases that are talking about the concept of provocation. Okay, so this is our search for dog bite provocation cases in the state of Illinois. As you can see, it's yielded 5,087 cases. That's way too many cases for us to read. So what we need is some way to sift through these and find out which ones are going to be pertinent to our research and our topic. So one thing you can do is just sort by relevance, which it's already done for you. So this is what Lexis, based on your search term, thinks are the best cases. So the first one that comes up is CREAC v. Will, and these bars down here are super helpful. So these are showing you your search terms and how often they show up in this case. So dog bite is blue, provoke or provocation is purple or pink, and you can see there's a lot of discussion of dog bite and a lot of discussion of provocation. So CREAC v. Will looks like a really good case. We're going to click on that in a second, but let's just go down and look at some other cases. As you can see, this one, we have a lot of dog bite discussion, but not as much provocation discussion. So maybe that one's not as good as CREAC. This one, again, is a little more sparse with its discussion of our search terms. So let's just go back up to CREAC. That looks like it's going to be a good case. Okay, so there are some techniques you can use here so you don't have to read every case that you click on, and you can try to weed out the cases that are going to be really helpful to you and the ones that aren't. So if we just scroll down a little bit, we have our core terms that might be useful. And we know that this case talks about provocation because we already saw that in the preview above. But then this case summary section can be very helpful. I would read this overview section. The overview section is going to give you an idea of what kind of the whole case is about. So if you read that and you start to go like, well, this really wasn't about what I'm researching, then you can move on to a different case. But the head notes are a very helpful tool. Westlaw has a similar system of head notes. And what these are is they've sort of categorized different topics discussed in the cases to help you hone in on specific topics. So like, for instance, the first head note here is about jury instructions. If you were writing a paper about jury instructions, maybe that would be really helpful. You could click on that head note and go find other cases that have talked about jury instructions. But we don't care about jury instructions. We don't care about standard of review. We care about this topic of strict liability, harm caused by animals, and provocation. So here Lexis has identified a topic that is pertinent to our research, and they've made a specific head note for it. And this text here is actually a snippet from the case below. So what you can do is click on this HN3, head note 3, and it's going to take you to where in the case the court is discussing this topic. What you can also do is click on more like this head note, and it will give you other cases that have discussed this same topic. But we're going to stick within Kirkham right now, and we're just going to click on head note 3 and see where in the case the court is discussing this topic of provocation. So you see there, that's the exact snippet that was above. And then you see we're just scanning here, we see that provocation comes up a lot in this discussion. So where I find this to be super valuable is if you go to the piece of the case that's discussing provocation or whatever your issue is, then that's where the court is going to be discussing other cases that they've looked to for them to understand what provocation means. So right here you see it gives us another case, Nelson v. Lewis. So this court, the Kirkham v. Will Court, has said, hey, we value what happened in Nelson v. Lewis, and we cited to that case. So we know we can then go use Nelson as a resource. So here's a discussion of Nelson. Here's another case in Stell v. Dose. We have another case that the Kirkham court has talked about. Do we have any other ones? Yeah, look, Robinson v. Meadows. So this court is doing another one, Smith v. Pitchford, Wade v. Rich. Wow, this has a ton of cases. So you could use now Kirkham v. Will as an anchor to do all this other research. So what I would do is I would open up a different case like this, Nelson v. Lewis, and then I would just repeat that process. So let's scroll down. Do we have an overview? Yes, we have the same thing, overview. So read that overview so we know what Nelson v. Lewis is about. Come down to your head notes. Here's a head note on provocation. Click on HN3. It's going to take us to the piece of the case that discussed provocation, so we can read that part as well.
All right, so that's how you would conduct research. Just keep going through, finding cases, finding those keywords, reading the overviews to make sure you're understanding the cases and how they apply to your facts, and then using cases to find other cases. As part of your research, you also need to organize this stuff. So if you're just reading it, you're not really keeping track of everything. So you're going to need some system to keep track of everything you're researching. So I'm going to put this research organization as sort of step 2.5, but really you would be doing this as you're doing your research at the same time. So I've had a lot of students who their professors are asking them to make a research chart out of their research. I never really did a research chart when I was in law school. I just sort of kept a master document. But since I've seen so many students being required to make a research chart, I'm going to make a little research chart for this case just to show you how it works. All right, let's take a look at this research chart so you can understand how you'll have to start organizing your facts from the cases. So I just have different headings here: source, facts, holding, and rationale. As you can see, I have here that statute that we found, the first thing that we found, and I just pasted into it the exact text of that statute that we found. And then you see here I have the different cases. Here's the Kirkham case. That was the first one we found. Here's the Nelson case. That was the one that we found right off of Kirkham. Robinson, that was also in Kirkham. Seaworth, I'm not sure if that was, but we just saw Stell v. Dose was also in the Kirkham case. So what we're trying to keep track of here are some facts that we think are going to compare to our facts. The holding is where the court came down on the case. So the legal issue we're asking in all of these cases was there provocation between the victim and the dog? If the answer is yes, this is an example where provocation was found. If the answer is no, that's a situation where there was no provocation. And then over here on the right, the last thing we have is rule/rationale. So as we're reading the cases, we need to have some rules that we're pulling out of those cases that then we can apply to our situation between Dingo and Kenny to decide whether or not Kenny has provoked Dingo before he got bit. So as I went through this and I looked at the cases, I was looking for facts that might compare to my facts and then trying to find some rules that I can then apply to my case. So for instance, what facts did I find important from the Nelson v. Lewis case, the second case that we just found? So in that case, what happened? And this is sort of a shorthand. We can always go back to the case and pull out snippets from the case, but this is just for me to understand and process what happened in the Nelson case versus what happened in my case. So in the Nelson case, a 2-year-old girl fell and stepped on a dog's tail while the dog was chewing a bone. The dog reacted by scratching the girl's eye, causing injury, and there was no evidence that the girl or anyone else had aggravated or teased the dog, and the dog had no history of vicious behavior. So in that case, girl stepped on a dog's tail. Is that provocation? The holding, the court said yes. We're not going to look at intention. We're just going to say, how would a dog react if their tail got stepped on? Would it attack a person? Yes, we're saying that was provoked. We need to get more into it to understand what's provocation and what's not, but we know that a little girl stepping on a dog's tail is provocation. Did Kenny step on Dingo's tail? No, but maybe some of his actions are similar to stepping on his tail. So then as far as rules and rationales that I pulled out of this case, the case tells us it sort of converts our statute into elements, which you'll be very familiar with elements in your first year of law school. So it sort of has like a 1, 2, 3, 4. What does the person have to prove in order to recover under the statute? And we also got some rules that the court in Nelson v. Lewis explored. For instance, provocation is defined as an act or process of provoking, stimulation, or incitement. Well, that's not very helpful. So what happened there is they saw the word provocation in the statute. They don't know what that means, so they go to the dictionary, and the dictionary tells them what provocation means, but that doesn't really help us here. So what they add in is that provocation within the meaning of the instant statute means either intentional or unintentional provocation. In their case, a little girl stepped on the tail. She wasn't trying to hurt the dog or incite anything from the dog. And what the court is saying is when we look at provocation, we're not going to ask whether the person was trying to provoke the dog. We're just going to ask whether or not their actions did provoke the dog. Okay, so what you do is you go through each case that you think is important, you pull out the facts, you give us the holding, whether or not provocation was found, and then you try to pull out any rules that you think we can use to apply to our case. So for my research, I ended up with 6 sources. One of them is the statute itself, and then we picked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cases that I thought were important. So as far as how long the research takes, it's really impossible for me to say because it really depends on what issue you're researching, how complex it is. Maybe you have more than one issue. Maybe it's a really hard to understand legal concept. So it's really all going to depend on that. But at a bare minimum, I would say you need at least 3 hours of research to really understand a single legal issue.
That does it for part 1 of this video. Make sure you check out the second part, which covers CREACing, outlining, and writing the draft. And remember, you can download all of the files associated with this project on my website, jdlogic.org. Thanks for watching.